Numa or Swamp of Death was the third map that we got for zombies in Call of Duty World at War. It released on June the 11th of 2009, and like the previous map, Verrucht was a part of the Call of Duty evolution. It was a step forward. While Verrucht introduced us to perks, traps, things that would stay in zombies for years, there were still a few essentials missing. And Numa gave us them. Every single World at War map contributes towards zombies being what it is today. Some more than others, and Numa is no different. If you were to ask me what my least favourite World at War map was, I would probably have to say Nectar and Toten. I'm not saying that it's bad, simply because it's the simplest out of the four, but being that it was the first, you could understand that, and so if I had to pick another, I'd probably say Numa. I love the atmosphere on Verrucht, and Numa, whilst it was good, just doesn't quite top those, but that's not to say that it's not an important map. If we don't count the ray gun, it gave us our very first wonder weapon. It introduced us to different modes of transportation like the zipline and special rounds, which weren't a thing up until this point. All features that now you identify with zombies that were introduced in Numa, so it was an extremely important map. But for some reason, it was probably my least played. I don't quite know what it was, because in 2009 I would have been, I think, 12 years old. Was Numa too scary for me? Too difficult? Too big? Because a lot of maps around this time were relatively small? I don't know. But whichever of the three elements that to me make up a zombies map you look at, being Easter eggs, gameplay and storyline, Numa had all three. On the gameplay side, like I mentioned, this was the first time we were introduced to wonder weapons in quotation marks. Yes, we had the ray gun, but in terms of map defining wonder weapons that you can only get on a certain map, this was the first time we saw something like it, and the wonder weapon that we were given was the Wunderwaffe. Now that we've had ones like the Thunder Gun or the Sliquifier pre-patch, the Apothecon Servant, even the Ray Gun Mark II, Mark III, the Wunderwaffe isn't actually that good, but for its time and how Numa worked, being that on World at War you could only have a maximum of 24 zombies spawning at once, the Wunderwaffe was the perfect wonder weapon. And strangely enough, when I ask a lot of people this question, everyone seems to think that we first saw this wonder weapon in Der Riese, but it wasn't, it was Numa. But like I was saying, this was an amazing wonder weapon for this map, because you can only have a maximum of 24 zombies spawn at once, and the Wunderwaffe can kill up to 10 zombies with one shot. That means 2 shots from it, and you've killed a whole wave, and it has infinite damage, so no matter what round you are on, it's always going to insta-kill. So for the time, yes, it was the best wonder weapon in the game, but also, well, it was the only one. This map introduced different modes of transportation instead of just running from one area to the other. It had a zipline. Yes, not the most useful feature because there was only one of them. There are 4 main areas you can go to in Numa, and there is one zipline that takes you to one of those areas. So honestly, it's not something I ever really used. I think the main major change was the introduction of special rounds. These are different types of enemies other than the zombies. The Hellhounds on World at War were unpredictable, scary, just seeing them come out of the fog from the swamp with their red glowing eyes, their body in flames. And this was a game changer because for every special round that we had, at the end you would get a max ammo. Previously, there was really no way of knowing when you would get a max ammo. And now you knew you'd get one every other round. So whereas you'd have to change your weapon when you were running low because you were uncertain when you get more ammo, now you had a slight idea. So it changed the way you play. That being said though, the Hellhounds really weren't difficult. Numa was quite different to any other zombies map. And you could actually say in one aspect, it took a step backwards. We were given a power switch in Verrucht, which we've seen again and again by this point, but the map after it was introduced in Verrucht, in Numa, they took the power switch away, and instead we were given randomised perks. The perk machines could spawn in any of the 4 areas, the storage hut, the comm room, the doctor's quarters, or the fishing hut. This had a big effect on gameplay, because in one game you could end up getting Juggernog pretty early on, but in a different game it could be the last perk you get. And in some instances, if you aren't too good at zombies, that could mean the difference between life and death. For any zombies player really, Juggernog is one of the first perks you buy, and especially on World at War when there was a 2-hit down system. So this was a nice change from the regular, oh, I know where the perks are spawning, we're going straight there first to buy Juggernog, whereas on Numa, that wasn't the case. It was down to luck whether you got the perk you wanted first or not. I've always been more of a casual zombies player, and what I mean by that is I never really played for high rounds. The highest I would ever go on zombies would be round 50, and that would be later on in games like Black Ops 2 and BO3, especially not World at War and Black Ops 1. But speaking from a perspective of someone who doesn't know anything about this, I did notice on YouTube a lot of the high rounds were set on Numa. And when I say high rounds, I mean crazy high rounds. Not round 50, 100, 200, 300. I'm talking more. I noticed that this was the map they were set on. If you were to ask me, I would have always said, well, surely Derice would have been easier. You can just camp on the catwalk. Verrucht wouldn't be the map to do it on, neither would Nacht. But from just what I've seen on YouTube, a lot of the high rounds were set on Numa. Why that is, I don't know. Is it the 24 zombies limit? Is it the Wunderwaffe / zombie capacity combination? Is it the big open areas of Numa? I don't know. So from a gameplay perspective, Numa is an all-rounder. It's not difficult, it's not super easy. You had the advantage of a wonder weapon, different modes of transportation, and traps. The flogger, the electroshock defense. You don't have to bother turning on a power switch. I always thought it was a good map, but it was never one that I really just felt like playing. I never said to myself, you know what, I feel like playing a game of Numa, but I just can't say why that was. I always thought Derice was the better map, and when I wanted something different, Verrucht was more of a challenge to me and exciting. So yeah, I always just thought Numa was okay, but an important map in the building blocks of zombies. From the storyline and Easter egg side, you could argue this is the most important. Easter eggs up until this point weren't a major thing in zombies. Yes, Verrucht had a few, 2 or 3. Nacht had 1, but Numa introduced a few. And these tied into a story that Treyarch had started to build. And how do we know that? Well, we played as the Ultimus characters. Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai and Dempsey. We went from lifeless characters that didn't really speak to all of a sudden in Numa, characters that were full of life and interesting, and we all know where their story went. There were some really creepy Easter eggs. The radio from Peter McCain's handler, reciting numbers and trying to make contact with him.
R-4808N 371406 115 4840.
Receiving this transmission, Peter. If you are not, then all is already lost. You must know by now that we failed to contain the asylum, and that we had to move the experiment here. Location. The numbers will guide you. The giant must remain at all costs. Repeat, Derice must remain safe at all costs. The DG2 experiments continue. Might be our only advantage now. Find Dr. Max's. Only they may know what's going on. The use of 115 is dangerous at best. I'm not sure how long we can continue here. We've lost most of our best people. I hope you get this. I hope it hasn't happened there too. But I'm almost out of hope.
6054 06.96 101 55 44.94.
We even saw Peter hanging from the rooftop after getting his parachute caught. Mind you, at the time, we didn't know this. There were speculations that he was hung by Division 9, the people who worked at this facility. There were speculations that he killed himself because of the zombies, or that he just hung himself accidentally. A lot of theory. That was confirmed later on, but that was exciting yet scary to see this man hanging. There was the radio where you could hear the soldiers in Verrucht, which was the map previous to this. There is also the massive meteor of element 115 that you can see outside of the map, which has big implications on the story. But again, a lot of this we didn't know. If I had to sum Numa up, I would say this set up the building blocks for the COD Zombies story. We were given little hints and teasers here and there that we had to put together to kind of ask the question, okay, well, there's something going on here. We're not being told it directly, but there are deeper forces at play. And that could describe this map as a whole. From the gameplay, Easter egg, and the story, this was the real beginning. Not Nacht, not Verrucht, not even Derice. Here, Numa.